Bigging up the Speaker's Corner crew, it would appear that Speaker's Corner is back on stream. Shout out to the brother, content over everything, who's on the scene right about now. And I've just watched the first installment of the videos coming out of the return of Speaker's Corner, following this whole lockdown period. And the video is a video featuring a man by the name of Steve. And he is questioning why people are rioting in the wake of the death or the killing of a criminal by the name of George Floyd. And I just felt that in light of that, and I know that as black people, as African people, a lot of us tend to get angry and incensed when we hear statements like what was made in that video. And I want to encourage us not to get vexed, not to get angry, and just understand what it is that we are watching, and organize in relation to what it is that we are watching. What we are watching is what Bobby E. Wright refers to as the psychopathic racial personality. And to sum that concept up, what he's saying is that in relation to the system, that is built upon the myth of white supremacy, it requires them. They are incapable of seeing us as African people as human beings. And so therefore, the system relates to us in very psychopathic ways, There is no humanity in terms of how they relate to us because they do not see us as humans, okay? And you can see that from the fact that the brother George Floyd is referred to as a criminal for the entire video. And so his criminality, therefore, precludes his humanity in terms of whether he's supposed to be treated correctly, whether justice should be sought for his killing, and these kinds of things. And so we just have to know what it is that we're watching and organize accordingly, And so I just felt that knowing how we tend to respond to statements like these, and knowing that there are many of us at the moment who seem to be preoccupied with convincing Europeans to stop mistreating us, I just felt that I could point out a few things, and explore a few things for our sake, coming out of that video. The first thing is the focus on George Floyd in isolation, bearing in mind that, as we know, kings and queens, that there were a couple months before that, it was Ahmaud Arbery, in and around the same time as George Floyd, it was Sister Breonna Taylor, a woman who was shot multiple times, in her own home, okay? So we know that it's not just George Floyd, the individual, that is being demonstrated against here, but a continuity of events of police brutality taking place over an extended period of time. And if we're just talking about the last year, then there are a number of things that have taken place that would cause us to be out on the streets in uprising, in protest, and so on and so forth. And so we don't have to really prove anything to these individuals. Just know that within ourselves and understand what is taking place in that video. The second thing is the exclusive reference to rioting as opposed to protest and demonstration. That speaks for itself. Do you know what I'm saying? That speaks for itself, because at the end of the day, the question of why people should be rioting in the wake of the killing of a criminal, the focus on rioting is intended to negate the need for justice. And so we just have to understand that, Don't get vexed, just understand where we are watch, okay? All right. Now, let's presume for a second, we're going to point out the hypocrisy of some of the things that were being said. Let's presume for a second that the perception given of brother George Floyd, And by the way, so before I even go there, I should mention the fact that a brother was killed in police custody in Birmingham. I believe it was last month. He goes by the name of Simeon Francis. A young man, African boy, was killed, shot down, gunned down by the police. I believe they shot him about with a machine gun, number of times, He's 14 years old. His name is João Pedro Matos Pinto, and so there are a number, of these kinds of events taking place in relation to black people killed by the arms of the state around the world. Yeah. Now, let's presume for a second that everything that Steve said about George Floyd was correct. He's an ardent criminal. Yeah. This is the hypocrisy of these individuals. These are people that take pride in Western society and the fact that Western society are nations built upon laws. Laws that are governed by a system of governance called democracy. Now, I was taught that within democratic societies, the principles that they are built on are the rights of the individual. And within a democratic society, the rights of individuals also extends to criminals. Criminals have rights. This is why when you are arresting a criminal, the person arresting them or in charge of the arrest has a duty to read them their rights. Yes? The people that are the arresting party have a duty of care to the person that they are arresting. No harm is supposed to come to them, yes, in the process of the arrest and as a result of the arrest. And these are people that take pride. These are people that would seek to propagandize to us the superiority of democracy because of things like these. But it seems when it comes to African people, when it comes to black people, being a criminal somehow supersedes your humanity. And in superseding your humanity, it somehow supersedes the extent to which if you are killed unlawfully, the people that advocate on your behalf are entitled to seek justice for your killing. We have to just know what's happening here. This is psychopathy. This is the psychopathic racialized personality. Kings of we just have to know what it is that we are seeing. Yeah? And look at the statement that was being made. Well, people need better examples of individuals and human beings to gather around, to form protest movements around. Mark Duggan was brought into the mix. And Mark Duggan was defined as one of the most evil criminals. Yeah? Well, let's look at that. Yeah? Look at the hypocrisy of this statement. The other day I was at Trafalgar Square and gangs of white youth came down to enact violence on a group of African people and others who were peacefully demonstrating in Trafalgar Square. Why were they fired up? They were fired up because the week prior, a statue of a white man by the name of Edward Colson was taken down in Bristol. Around the same time, the same day in fact, a statue of Winston Churchill was desecrated in Parliament Square. These white people were prepared to respond violently, yes, in relation to statues being taken down and desecrated. Who were the people? Edward Colson, a virulent and unrepentant enslaver of African people. Is Edward Colson not a criminal? If white youth can be inspired to react violently to the taking down of statues of historical criminals, yes? Yes, and I'm including Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill, former Prime Minister of this country, who is responsible for the death of millions of people around the world. In Africa, in India, and in other places on the planet Earth. Responsible for the death of... Is Mark Duggan more evil than Edward Colson? Is Mark Duggan more evil than Winston Churchill? Is Mark Duggan responsible for the enslavement of hundreds and thousands of African people? The torture, the beating, the raping, the theft, the separation. Is he responsible for those things? Is Mark Duggan responsible for the starving to death of millions of people in India? I'm not aware of that. But white people are allowed to react violently, unquestionably, in relation to the taking down and the desecration of statues of their own criminal ancestors who lived years, decades, and centuries ago. But black people are not allowed to protest in righteous anger against the killing of one of our own that we see in the world. A police officer kneels on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and we are not supposed to be angered about this. We just have to understand what it is that we are watching, what it is that we are listening to in relation to these arguments, kings and queens. Yeah? Let me give you, finally, a couple of examples of where this leads. Yeah? Just for our understanding. We have to know where this leads. All right? 1985. 2 black women were killed in police custody within a month of each other. The first was Cherry Gross let me rephrase that. Cherry Gross was not killed. Cherry Gross was shot in the chest. Yeah, the bullet hit her spine and paralyzed her for the rest of her life. She died just a few years ago in relation to complications to that particular injury. Okay? The other African woman was called Cynthia Jarrett. In both instances, the police raided the homes of these African women in pursuit of their sons. Yes, their sons. The son of Cynthia Jarrett was charged with a crime, which he was later acquitted of. The son of Cherry Gross was just coming out of prison. Yeah, he had some run-ins with the law. But the fact is that their sons were perceived as criminal, and that gave the police the right to invade their homes. And in the case of Cynthia Jarrett, she was aggressed to the point whereby she suffered a heart attack and died in police custody. And Cherry Gross was shot in the chest. Yes? An injury that paralyzed her for life. We could even talk about Joy Gardner, an African woman who came over to this country with her 5-year-old son from Jamaica and ended up in police custody with 13 meters of tape wrapped around her head and neck, which eventually suffocated her to death. In the cases of Cynthia Jarrett and Cherry Gross, the black community rose up. There was an uprising in Brixton and in Tottenham in 1985. But I'm making the point that the dehumanization of African people results in the treatment of African people by the institutions of society. And those private citizens who reinforce this dehumanization are simply providing a justification for the inhumane ways in which police and other institutions of society treat African people. We just have to know wagwan, kings and queens. Yeah? So don't get angry. Don't get vexed. Just understand what Steve is representing. Understand what Steve is justifying. Abibi Tumi, Black Power. Abibi Fahodie, African Liberation. Big up content over everything. Shakara speaks. Hotel.